Hey guys, tonight we delve into the shadowy corridors of the 12th century, a time when the world was lit by firelight and the vast velvet expanse of the night sky held both terror and profound mystery. Imagine, if you will, being a knight, your days filled with the clang of steel and the weight of chainmail. Yet your nights are stolen by an irresistible pull towards the silent, glittering cosmos. You're a warrior, yes, but your true quest lies among the stars. A pursuit so strange, so out of step with your era that it borders on the perilous. Forget dragons. Try explaining to your feudal lord why you're up at 3 a.m., sketching Orion's belt. You probably won't survive the puzzled silence, let alone the potential accusations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love it if you'd post your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from across this spinning globe of ours. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born into a world of stone and shadow, cold drafts, and the ever-present scent of wood smoke clinging to damp wool. It's the 12th century, a time when life is often short, frequently brutal, and invariably governed by rigid hierarchies. Your family is noble, not the highest echelon perhaps, but comfortable enough. This means your cradle is less likely to be a simple basket of reeds and more a carved wooden structure, swaddled in linens that, while coarse by modern standards, are a mark of status. Your first sounds are the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the lowing of cattle in the bailey, the rustle of your mother's skirts, and the murmur of Latin prayers from the household chapel. From your earliest memories, you are aware of expectations. As a son of the house, your path is largely predetermined. Learn to ride before you can properly run. Learn to wield a wooden sword as soon as your small hands can grip it. Your future is one of martial prowess, land management, and perhaps, if you're particularly astute or well-connected, a place at the court of a greater lord, or even the king. Education, for you, will focus on the practicalities of warfare, a smattering of estate accounts, and the essential tenets of chivalry. Loyalty, courage, and a devout, if somewhat unquestioning, faith. Historians still argue whether the concept of childhood, as we understand it, even existed for the medieval nobility, or if children were simply miniature, less competent adults rushed towards responsibility. You certainly feel the latter. Play is training, and training is serious. Yet, amidst this earthy, demanding reality, something else calls to you, something silent, distant, and utterly captivating. It begins as a flicker of awareness, a moment when, perhaps laid on your back in a patch of sunlight in the castle courtyard, you find your gaze drifting upwards, not to the passing clouds, but to the sheer, overwhelming blue. And then comes the night. In your world, night is a different beast altogether. There are no streetlights, no comforting orange glow from distant cities. When the sun sets, true darkness descends, thick and palpable. Inside the castle walls, rushlights and tallow, candles sputter, casting long, dancing shadows that make familiar rooms seem alien and alive with unseen things. The air grows colder. The sounds of the day are replaced by the hoot of an owl, the howl of a distant wolf, or the uneasy creak of ancient timbers settling. Most people huddle indoors, warding off the chill and the imagined terrors of the dark. Superstitions are rife. The night is the domain of spirits, of things best left undisturbed. Your nursemaid, a woman whose face is a roadmap of rural anxieties, fills your young ears with tales of mischievous sprites and a very grumpy specific demon said to inhabit the old well. Best not to look too deeply into dark places, she warns. But for you, the darkness outside holds a different allure. From a narrow, arrow-slit window in your small chamber, a window designed more for defense than for views, you catch your first proper glimpse of the undiluted night sky. And it takes your breath away. Unpolluted by artificial light, the heavens are a riot of stars, a dense tapestry of shimmering points against an abyss so profound It feels like you could fall into it forever. It's not just a few bright sparks. It's a multitude, a celestial ocean. You see the Milky Way for what it truly is. A vast, luminous river flowing through the cosmos, not the faint smudge it often appears as today. This fascination is peculiar. Other boys your age are boasting of their first kill in a hunt, or the strength of their arm in practice bouts. You, however, find yourself lingering by that window, craning your neck, feeling an inexplicable pull. It's a secret you keep, mostly because you lack the words to explain it, even to yourself. How do you tell your gruff, battle-scarred father, a man whose idea of celestial navigation is figuring out which way is east by the rising sun so he knows where to point his prayers and his army, that you feel a kinship with those silent, distant fires? He'd likely grunt, ruffle your hair, and suggest you spend more time in the tilt yard. Maybe he'd worry you were a bit too sensitive. After all, too much moon-gazing was said to unsettle the mind. The very word lunatic has its roots right there. The household priest, a man whose knowledge of the heavens is strictly scriptural and geocentric. The earth firmly at the center, everything else dutifully revolving around it as God ordained, might offer a more theological frown. The stars are God's handiwork, yes, beautiful and orderly, a testament to his divine plan. But to stare too long, to question their arrangement, that smacks of an unhealthy curiosity, a potential straying from the accepted path. One common historical fact is that the Ptolemaic system, with Earth at the center, was the unchallenged cosmological model in Europe for over a millennium, and the Church had thoroughly integrated it into its theology. To even idly wonder if it might be otherwise was, well, not a career-enhancing move. So your gaze remains largely your own. You learn the shapes, the patterns, not from charts or books. Such things are rare and certainly not for a child's idle amusement, but from direct repeated observation. That cluster of stars that looks like a jeweled dagger, the bright one that seems to follow you, the faintest smudges that hint at something more. You don't know their names, not the scholarly ones anyway, but you give them your own. It's a private language, a silent conversation with the cosmos. This odd gaze, as your mother might sigh to your father, becomes a quiet part of who you are, a hidden current beneath the surface of your prescribed noble life. You wonder if anyone else sees it, truly sees it, this breathtaking spectacle, laid out every night, free for the looking. But people mostly seem to look down, at the mud, at their feet, at the task at hand. You, however, keep looking up. Years pass, as they have a habit of doing, even in the slow-moving current of the 12th century. You are now a youth, perhaps 13, maybe 14. The down on your chin is still more fluff than bristle, but your limbs are lengthening, your shoulders broadening. The wooden practice sword has been replaced by blunted steel, and the pony you learn to ride on has given way to a destrier that views you with a certain professional disdain. Your days are increasingly filled. Lessons with the master-at-arms, who smells faintly of old leather and disapproval. Sessions with the estate steward, trying to make sense of crop yields and tithes, which frankly seem far more complex than any constellation. And of course, endless, mind-numbing drills in the bailey. Left parry, right thrust, shield up, don't drop your sword like a sack of turnips, boy. It's all very earthy. Your secret astronomical musings continue, snatched moments at that. Same arrow-slit window, now a little higher from the ground as you've grown. But the view remains the same eternal, silent spectacle. You've learned to recognize more patterns, to anticipate the slow, majestic wheeling of the heavens through the seasons. Then one evening it happens. It starts subtly, a faint, unfamiliar smudge in the western sky, just after sunset. You almost dismiss it as a wisp of cloud, but there's a sharpness to its edge, a persistence that clouds lack. Night after night, you watch it, and it grows. The smudge elongates, brightens, and begins to develop a tail, a pale, ethereal banner unfurling against the deepening twilight. It's a comet, You don't know the word comet in the way a future astronomer would. Perhaps you hear it called a hairy star, Stella Cometa, or a long-haired star, by the few literate people who might consult an old text. To most, it's simply a terrifying new arrival in the otherwise predictable heavens. The reaction within the castle, and indeed across the land, is immediate and visceral. Fear. This isn't like a familiar planet or a meteor, those fleeting shooting stars that are over in an instant. This lingers. It hangs there, night after night, a baleful beacon. The castle priest, Father Michael, a man whose jowls quiver with pious conviction, declares it an omen. Of what, precisely, he's not entirely sure, but it's definitely bad. Very bad. A sign from God, he thunders from his makeshift pulpit in the great hall. A portent of war, or pestilence, or the death of a great king. His eyes scan the assembled household, lingering on anyone who looks shifty, which, under the circumstances, is most people. Remember that grumpy demon in the well your nursemaid warned you about? This comet feels like its celestial cousin come to visit and curdle the milk. This is a mainstream historical fact. Throughout much of history, comets were almost universally regarded as harbingers of disaster. The Bayeux Tapestry, depicting the Norman conquest of England in 1066, famously features Halley's comet, with the terrified English king Harold looking on, a clear sign of his impending doom. So, Father Michael isn't exactly breaking new ground with his dramatic pronouncements. He's part of a long, distinguished line of doommongers. The cook starts muttering about spoiled harvests. The guards on the walls speak in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously towards the celestial. Visitor, your father convenes solemn meetings with his knights, discussing preparedness, perhaps for an attack from a rival baron emboldened by this heavenly sign, or maybe just for a particularly bad bout of plague. It's a good time to double-check the castle's grain stores and the sharpness of your sword. But your reaction? It's entirely different. While others see doom, you see wonder. Pure, unadulterated, heart-pounding wonder. The fear that prickles your skin is not of divine wrath, but of missing a single moment of this incredible spectacle. You are utterly transfixed. The comet is beautiful, in a wild, untamed way. Its head, a fiercely glowing nucleus, seems to burn, with an inner light, and its tail, stretching halfway across the sky on the clearest nights, shimmers with a delicate, ghostly luminescence. It moves, slowly, yes, but perceptibly. Night by night, you track its position against the familiar backdrop of fixed stars, sketching its location on hoarded scraps of parchment with a charred stick, your first real attempt at systematic observation. This fiery omen, meant to terrify and subdue, instead ignites something within you. Your passive appreciation for the stars transforms into an active, burning curiosity. What is it? Where did it come from? Where is it going? Why does it look like that? The priest says it's a warning, a divine message written in fire. But you, looking at its silent, majestic passage, can't shake the feeling that it's something more. Something natural, perhaps, if unimaginably vast and powerful. The scholars of the age had various, often colourful theories about what comets were. Some, following Aristotle, believed they were atmospheric phenomena, like lightning or rainbows, hot, dry exhalations from the Earth rising into the upper air and igniting. A quirky tidbit is that some even thought comets were the souls of famous men ascending to heaven, or, less charitably, earthly grease burning up. You can just imagine the medieval equivalent of a tabloid. Local duke's soul spotted, streaking across sky. Looked a bit greasy. You spend every available moment watching it. You feign illness to avoid evening prayers. You make excuses to stay. Up late, you rise before dawn, all for another glimpse. Your arrow-slit window is no longer sufficient. You find yourself sneaking onto the battlements, braving the chill night wind, and the risk of being caught by a grumpy sentry, just for an unobstructed view. The world shrinks to you, the cold stone beneath your feet, and that incredible, luminous visitor from the depths of space. Historians still debate the precise psychological impact such celestial apparitions had on the average medieval mind versus the educated elite. Was it pure terror for all? Or did a select few, even then, feel a stir of scientific curiosity, however nascent? You are firmly in the latter camp, though you wouldn't have the words for it. The comet stays for weeks, a constant silent presence in your life. It becomes your secret, your obsession. The fear around you is a dull hum, easily ignored in the face of such cosmic grandeur. You feel a strange sense of connection to it, as if it has appeared just for you, to awaken this dormant part of your soul. Your peers are probably still arguing about who unhorsed whom in the latest practice joust, or perhaps complaining about the quality of the ale. You, however, are charting the course of a visitor from beyond the known world. It's a lonely pursuit, but exhilarating. And as the comet finally begins to fade, receding back into the darkness from whence it came, it leaves behind not a sense of relief, but a profound longing, and a newly kindled, unshakable resolve. Your quiet gaze at the stars is no longer enough. Now you need to understand. The comet may have faded from the night sky, but its incandescent passage has left an indelible mark on your young mind. The world, which once seemed to end at the horizon, or perhaps at the borders of the nearest kingdom, now feels immeasurably vaster, filled with mysteries that beckon from an almost unimaginable distance. Your previous, somewhat passive, stargazing now feels inadequate, like trying to understand the ocean by looking at a single puddle. You need more. You need knowledge, and in the 12th century, knowledge of the stars, beyond the most basic calendrical or astrological predictions sanctioned by the Church, is a rare and often suspect commodity. Your first challenge is access. Books are incredibly precious. Each one is hand-copied, usually by monks, onto expensive parchment made from animal skins. A single substantial volume could represent months, even years of labor, and the skins of an entire flock of sheep. They are not casually lent out, especially not to a young nobleman whose primary education is supposed to revolve around the decidedly less ethereal subjects of swordsmanship and siegecraft. Your castle library, if it can even be called that, likely consists of a few religious texts, perhaps a tattered copy of Vegetius's De Re Militari for military strategy, and maybe a bestiary filled with wonderfully illustrated but biologically dubious creatures. Remember how the cook blamed the comet for spoiled harvests? The bestiary probably has a creature that sours milk with a single glance, useful for kitchen staff to blame their mistakes on. So you begin your quest for knowledge in secret. You start with the castle priest, Father Michael. Despite his fire and brimstone pronouncements about the comet, he is, by the standards of your household, a learned man. He can read Latin, the language of scholarship, and he possesses a few carefully guarded books. Approaching him requires a delicate touch. You can't just ask, "Hey father, got any books that explain what that hairy star really was? Beyond, impending doom." That would be like asking your drill sergeant for ballet lessons. Instead, you feign a newfound piety, a sudden interest in the divine order of God's creation. You ask seemingly innocent questions about the saints associated with certain feast days, and how those feast days relate to the seasons, and how the seasons are marked by the sun and stars. Father Michael, perhaps flattered by this unexpected, scholarly interest from a youth more accustomed to denting practice dummies, might unbend a little. He might show you a rudimentary Computus manuscript, a text used for calculating the date of Easter, which involves some basic lunar and solar cycles. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Computus was a significant driver of early medieval astronomical study, as accurately determining Easter was a major ecclesiastical concern. It's not exactly advanced astrophysics, but it's a start. You pore over the tables, the arcane symbols, the explanations of how the sun's path, the ecliptic, determines the length of days and the passage of seasons. It's dry, it's heavily theological, but hidden within the Latin are nuggets of actual astronomical observation, passed down from ancient sources. You learn about the spheres, the crystalline orbs upon which the planets and stars are supposedly fixed, all revolving around a stationary Earth. You read about the 12 constellations of the zodiac, the band through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to travel. This is useful, practical knowledge, tied to the agricultural year, and even to accepted medical practices of the time, which often involved astrology. Even your horse probably gets better medical care if its humours are aligned with the correct planetary influences. But you crave more than just the approved, sanitized version. You hear whispers, perhaps from a travelling merchant or a minstrel whose songs hint at wider worlds of other kinds of knowledge. Knowledge from the ancient Greeks or from the Arabs, who are reputed to be masters of mathematics and stargazing. Such texts, if they exist in your part of the world at all, are rare, possibly heretical. Historians still debate the full extent of the transmission of classical and Arabic scientific knowledge into Latin Europe during the 12th century, a period often called the 12th century Renaissance, precisely because of this intellectual flowering. It was happening, but it was often piecemeal, sometimes through a single, painstakingly translated manuscript. Your search becomes more daring. You might discreetly inquire if any visiting friars or pilgrims carry books of a less strictly devotional nature. You might even, and this is a risky move, try to gain access to the library of a nearby monastery, a repository of learning far greater than your family's castle could ever boast. Monasteries were the intellectual powerhouses of the age, preserving and copying texts. Getting in, however, and then getting access to anything beyond the approved scriptural commentaries would require immense luck or considerable charm, or perhaps a strategically offered donation from your father, ostensibly, for the good of the monks' souls, but really for your access to their shelves. Alongside your quest for forbidden tomes, you begin to experiment with crafting your own rudimentary observation tools. You've seen how surveyors use simple plumb lines to determine verticals. Could something similar be used to measure the height of a star above the horizon? You try, fashioning a basic quadrant from a piece of smooth wood, marking degrees as best you can with a knife, using a weighted string as a sighting line. It's crude, laughably inaccurate by later standards, but it's yours. You try to build a simple cross staff, another ancient instrument, essentially two pieces of wood, one sliding along the other, to measure angular separations between stars. Your first attempts are clumsy. The wood splits, the markings are uneven, the moving parts stick. Your knuckles are raw, your thumbs sore. One quirky tidbit from the era is the sheer ingenuity people applied to everyday problems with limited resources. For instance, a common way to make glue involved boiling down animal cartilage and hides. You can imagine your first astrolabe attempt being held together with something that smells suspiciously like last week's stew. You work in secret, often late at night in your chamber, by the flickering light of a single candle, or in a disused storeroom, hiding your creations under sacks of old grain if someone approaches. The risk of discovery is constant. What if your father finds these strange contraptions? What if the priest sees your diagrams, which look less like pious meditations on God's glory and more like, well, who knows what they look like to an untrained eye? Certainly not like something a proper young knight should be making. Each successful, albeit wobbly, measurement feels like a triumph. Each small insight gleaned from a smuggled page of text feels like uncovering a treasure. Your passion, born under the light of a comet, is now being painstakingly nurtured in the shadows, fueled by forbidden words and makeshift tools. Your clandestine studies and tool-making efforts, while yielding small, intensely satisfying victories, are ultimately limited by your isolation and the scarcity of truly advanced knowledge. The computer's texts, while foundational, only scratch the surface of the vast astronomical learning you instinctively feel must exist somewhere. The rudimentary instruments you fashion with your own hands, though born of ingenuity, lack the precision needed for the kind of deep, systematic mapping you dream of. You feel like someone trying to paint a mural with a single bore bristle. You need a mentor, or at least access to a richer vein of information than Father Michael, with all due respect to his sermons on the wages of sin, can provide. Your search, now less about specific books and more about finding a knowledgeable guide, leads you down some unlikely paths. You listen more intently to the conversations of travelers passing through your father's lands, merchants who have seen distant cities, pilgrims returning from Rome, or even further afield, perhaps even a scholar or two waylaid by misadventure or seeking patronage. You learn to sift through boasts and tall tales for genuine nuggets of information. It's during one such period of discreet inquiry, perhaps following a whispered rumor from a nervous-looking peddler who trades in rare herbs and even rarer parchments, that you hear of him, an old monk living in a small, somewhat dilapidated monastery nestled in a secluded valley a few days' ride away. This isn't one of the grand, powerful abbeys, but a minor house, known more for its isolation than its influence. The rumor is that this particular monk, Brother Alaric, is eccentric. He keeps to himself, is said to neglect his canonical duties in favor of puttering about with strange devices, and, most intriguingly, possesses a collection of unusual books, some supposedly rescued from a library in Spain, a land where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholarship had intermingled for centuries. Spain, during this period, was a critical point of transmission for classical and Arabic knowledge into Europe. Scholars like Gerard of Cremona were busy in Toledo translating Arabic scientific texts, including Ptolemy's Almagest, the Bible of classical astronomy, into Latin. The idea that books from this intellectual melting pot might have found their way to a reclusive monk is tantalizing. Of course, the same rumor also suggests Brother Alaric might be a bit touched in the head, or possibly dabbles in things best left undabbled. Remember your nursemaid's well demon? Alaric is starting to sound like he might have a few of those, as house guests, summoning your courage and perhaps inventing a plausible excuse for your father, a pilgrimage to a local shrine perhaps, or the need to inspect a distant problematic piece of family land. You set off. The journey itself is an education, a reminder of the roughness of your world. You travel on horseback, probably with a single, long-suffering squire who thinks this whole expedition is a fool's errand when there's perfectly good hunting to be had closer to home. The roads are mere tracks, muddy in rain, dusty in sun. You ford rivers, navigate dense forests where bandits are a genuine concern, and spend nights in flea-ridden inns or, if you're lucky, the slightly less flea-ridden hospitality of another minor noble's hall. Finally, you reach the monastery. It's as unprepossessing as the rumors suggested. Stone walls in need of repair, a vegetable garden more weeds than produce, and an air of quiet neglect. The abbot, a weary man who seems surprised to have a visitor of your standing, is initially suspicious. When you ask specifically for Brother Alaric, his suspicion deepens into a frown. Brother Alaric, he sighs, is devout in his own way. He spends much time in contemplation, mostly of the heavens. There's a distinct lack of enthusiasm in his voice. Historians still argue whether such isolated pockets of unconventional scholarship within monasteries were tolerated out of genuine intellectual curiosity by superiors, or simply because remote houses were hard to effectively micromanage. The abbot here seems to lean towards the too much trouble to interfere school of thought. He eventually agrees to let you see Alaric, perhaps hoping you can talk some sense into the old man, or maybe just out of sheer boredom. You are led to a small, crumbling tower at the edge of the monastery grounds, separate from the main buildings. It's clearly not part of the original design. It looks like an old watchtower perhaps, repurposed. And as you approach, you notice something unusual. The roof is not fully intact. Part of it seems to have been deliberately removed, or perhaps designed to be retractable, offering a clear view of the sky. Brother Alaric himself is a surprise. You expect a wild-eyed hermit. Instead, you find a man of perhaps 60 years, with keen, intelligent eyes that sparkle with an almost youthful enthusiasm when he speaks of his passion. His habit is patched, his fingers ink-stained, but there's an undeniable vitality about him. His small chamber is crammed with books, real books, not just devotional texts, but hand-copied treatises with diagrams of spheres, tables of numbers, and strange symbols you recognize from your own tentative explorations. There are astrolabes, not crude wooden ones like your own attempts, but gleaming brass instruments, their intricate engravings catching the light. And there are star charts, far more detailed and extensive than anything you've ever imagined, scrolls of parchment, covered in delicate script and precisely plotted star positions. It's a treasure trove. One quirky tidbit about monastic life. While some orders were famously ascetic, others allowed for individual monks to pursue scholarly interests, provided they didn't overly neglect their core duties, leading to some very specialized, if obscure, expertise within monastery walls. Brother Alaric has clearly taken this to an extreme. He's wary at first. Why would a young knight, a man of war, be interested in the silent ballet of the stars? But as you hesitantly explain your own journey, the comet, the secret studies, your frustrating attempts to build instruments, his reserve melts away. He sees in you a kindred spirit, a fellow traveler on a lonely road. He smiles, a genuine, warm smile, and gestures to a particularly large, leather-bound volume. Ptolemy, he says, his voice raspy from disuse. Or at least, a Latin translation of a commentary on his Almagest. Difficult, but rewarding. And so begins your true apprenticeship. Brother Alaric, this reclusive monk with his hidden observatory, and his trove of ancient star charts, becomes your guide. He doesn't just let you look at his books. He teaches you how to read them, how to understand the complex geometry, the spherical trigonometry, the systems of celestial coordinates. He shows you how to use an astrolabe properly, how to measure the altitude of stars with a precision you'd only dreamed of. His observatory is indeed the top of the tower, open to the elements, where, night after night, wrapped in thick cloaks against the chill, he has patiently mapped the heavens. He is decades into this work, a solitary, devoted scholar. He explains the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the stars to gradually shift their positions over centuries, a concept known to the ancients but largely forgotten or ignored in much of medieval Europe. He even has charts that attempt to correct for it, based on older Arabic sources. This is far beyond Father Michael's Easter calculations. This is the real, deep magic of the cosmos, revealed not by divine pronouncements, but by patient observation and rigorous calculation. You feel as though you've finally found your way home. Your time with Brother Alaric in his secluded tower is transformative, an oasis of intellectual discovery in the otherwise martial rhythm of your young life. You absorb knowledge like a parched desert traveler, finding an unexpected spring. The complex diagrams in the ancient texts begin to make sense. The intricate movements of the astrolabe become second nature under his patient tutelage. You learn the Arabic names for stars, Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Rigel, names that roll off, Alaric's tongue like a familiar prayer, so different from the vague folk names you might have heard before, if any. He teaches you about epicycles and deference, the complex and ultimately incorrect, but remarkably predictive for its time, Ptolemaic system used to explain the puzzling retrograde motion of planets. It's a dizzying intellectual landscape, and you explore it with a hunger that surprises even yourself. You're still a knight in training, of course. You can't stay in this monastic haven forever. Duty, family, and the inexorable pull of your societal role eventually call you back. You leave Alaric's tower with a mind full of new knowledge, a newly acquired skill with the astrolabe. Perhaps he even gifted you a smaller, simpler one, or helped you refine your own, and a renewed dedication to your secret passion. Years slide by. You are a knight now, fully fledged. You've taken vows. You've perhaps even seen your first skirmish or two. The brutal, chaotic reality of medieval combat. A far cry from the somewhat sanitized drills of your youth. Your astronomical pursuits have, by necessity, become more clandestine than ever. A young noble dabbling in odd hobbies might be indulged. A sworn knight, responsible for men's lives and the defense of land, found spending his nights staring at the sky with strange brass contraptions, would invite serious questions about his fitness for command. The world is a tumultuous place. Popes and emperors vie for power, local lords squabble over inheritances and insults, and the call to crusade echoes across Christendom. This is a mainstream historical fact. The 12th century saw several major crusading efforts, including the Second Crusade, 1147 and 1149, and the preparations that would lead to the Third Crusade later in the century. The idea of traveling to the Holy Land to fight for the faith was a powerful motivator for knights across Europe. And so, inevitably, the call comes for you. Your lord, or perhaps even your king, is gathering forces to embark on the perilous journey to Outremer, the Crusader states in the Levant. It's an opportunity for glory, for fulfilling your knightly vows, for spiritual redemption, and, not incidentally, for plunder and adventure. Refusal is almost unthinkable for a man of your station and ambition. You find yourself preparing not for a night of observation, but for a long, arduous campaign in a distant, unfamiliar land. You pack your armor, your weapons, your horse, and, hidden deep within your personal baggage, carefully wrapped and protected, your astrolabe and a few precious hard-won charts or notes, a secret comfort, a link to that other world of silent, ordered stars. The journey itself is an ordeal. Whether by sea, a terrifying experience for most landlubbers crammed onto creaking, overcrowded ships. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our Egyptian tales? You might wish for some as the sun is relentless, or by the long overland route through hostile or indifferent territories, it's fraught with danger. Disease, hunger, shipwreck, bandits, and the sheer logistical nightmare of moving an army across medieval Europe and beyond take their toll. You see men die, not in glorious battle, but from dysentery, from infected wounds, from simple exhaustion. It's a harsh education in the realities of your world. But it's during this journey, and later, in the Holy Land itself, that your astronomical skill, so carefully hidden, unexpectedly finds a practical, even vital application. Armies, especially those moving through unfamiliar terrain, need to navigate. While daylight navigation relies on landmarks, the sun, and experienced guides, who are not always reliable or loyal, night marches are a different challenge. And in warfare, the ability to move men under the cover of darkness can be a significant advantage. One evening, perhaps, a critical reconnaissance mission is planned. The local guides are uncertain, the terrain confusing, and the margin for error slim. Your commander is fretting, his usual bluster deflated by the weight of responsibility. It's here, tentatively at first, that you might reveal a sliver of your unusual expertise. You might suggest that, if you can get a clear view of the stars, you can determine direction with considerable accuracy. Polaris, the North Star, or rather, the star that was closest to the celestial pole in the 12th century, as Polaris wasn't quite as perfectly aligned then as it is now, is a constant beacon. You know how to find it using the pointer stars of the Plough, or Big Dipper. You understand how the rotation of the heavens can be used to estimate the passage of time during the night. One quirky, though perhaps not widely known tidbit, is that experienced desert travelers in the Middle East had long used sophisticated star-based navigation, a skill often more advanced than that of their European counterparts at the time. Yafo are, in a small way, bridging that knowledge gap. Your commander, desperate, might be willing to try anything. He watches, skeptical but intrigued, as you set up your astrolabe, make your careful measurements, consult your cryptic notes. There's likely some muttering among your fellow knights. What's he doing with that brass thingamajig? Praying to the moon. But when your calculations lead to a successful night march, avoiding an enemy patrol, or finding a crucial water source in the arid landscape, skepticism begins to turn into grudging respect. Your strange hobby suddenly has battlefield utility. Historians still debate the typical level of navigational competence among medieval military leaders, but it's generally agreed that it was often rudimentary, relying more on local knowledge than on celestial mathematics. Your ability stands out. You might find yourself consulted more frequently. Not openly, perhaps. It's still a bit weird, this stargazing night, but discreetly. Sir Knight, your commander might say. We need to be at the pass of Al-Majnun before dawn. Can your stars guide us true? You are no longer just another warrior. You are the man who can read the secrets of the night sky. Your knowledge, once a purely personal passion, now serves your nightly duties in a way you could never have anticipated. It doesn't make the war any less brutal, or the sun any less scorching, but it gives you a unique role, a quiet confidence, and as you guide your comrades under the silent, watchful stars of a foreign land, you feel a profound connection between the two halves of your life, the warrior and the stargazer, merging in an unexpected, vital way. The heavens, it turns out, are not so distant from the affairs of men after all. You are now in the Holy Land, a landscape utterly alien to the damp greens and greys of your homeland. Here, the sun beats down with a fierce intensity, the air is often dry and dusty, and the nights when they come are a revelation. If you thought the skies back home were clear, they were merely a prelude to the astonishing clarity of the desert night. Away from the coastal humidity and the smoke of settled lands, the stars blaze with an intensity you've never witnessed. The Milky Way is no longer a gentle river, but a torrent of light, so bright it seems almost three-dimensional. Familiar, constellations are sharper and fainter stars, previously invisible or only glimpsed, now pop into view with startling clarity. This is an astronomer's dream, albeit one found in the midst of a brutal, ongoing conflict. Your unexpected navigational prowess has earned you a certain niche, a grudging respect, even if some of your more devoutly conventional comrades still eye your astrolabe with a mixture of suspicion and awe, as if it were a holy relic or a device of subtle sorcery. He talks to the stars, that one, they might mutter, though likely with less malice now that your talks have saved their bacon a few times. You're probably not invited to many dice games, but when it comes to figuring out which wadi leads where after sundown, you're suddenly everyone's best friend. The nature of warfare in the Crusader states often involves long patrols, sieges, and sudden skirmishes in arid, difficult terrain. There are periods of intense activity, and then, inevitably, periods of waiting, guarding a remote outpost, garrisoning a captured town, or simply enduring the long, hot days between campaigns. It is during these lulls, these enforced moments of stillness, that your true passion finds an unprecedented opportunity to flourish. Under the vast, clear canvas of the desert sky, you begin the most meticulous and sustained period of nightly observation you have ever undertaken. You are no longer limited to the hurried, furtive glances from an arrow-slit window or the occasionally clear night in Brother Alaric's tower. Here, night after night, barring cloud cover, which is blessedly infrequent in many seasons, the celestial sphere unfolds above you in all its glory. You have your astrolabe, perhaps a few improved sighting tools you've managed to fashion or acquire. The melting pot of cultures in Outremer means access to different technologies and craftsmanship if you know where to look. A mainstream historical fact is that the Crusader states were not just battlegrounds. They were also zones of cultural exchange where goods, ideas, and technologies from East and West intermingled, however uneasily. You might have encountered artisans in Antioch or Jerusalem who were familiar with more sophisticated instrument-making techniques than were common back home. You become a creature of the night, while your comrades sleep, or gamble, or tell tall tales around the dwindling cook fires. You find a quiet spot, perhaps on a section of the city wall, a rooftop, or a secluded dune if you're out in the wilderness, and you begin your work. You are systematic, you are patient, you are utterly absorbed. You are no longer just identifying constellations you learned from Alaric or the ancient texts. You are mapping them with a new level of detail. You are noting the relative brightness of stars, their colours, a subtle reddish hue here, a brilliant blue-white there, their positions relative to one another, with a precision that your earlier, cruder efforts could only hint at. You start to notice discrepancies. The star charts you have, copies of ancient observations, are good, but they are not perfect. some stars seem slightly out of place compared to their catalogued positions. This could be due to errors in the original observations, errors in transcription over centuries, or even, and this is a more profound thought, the stars themselves might have moved. The concept of proper motion, the idea that stars are not truly fixed but are themselves moving through space, was not something generally understood in your time. But meticulous observation over long periods can hint at such anomalies. Historians still argue about when the first inklings of proper motion truly began to trouble the fixed stars paradigm in Western thought. You might not have the framework to call it proper motion, but you see that what is on your parchment doesn't perfectly match what's in the sky. Your focus sharpens. You decide not just to refine existing charts, but to create your own, based directly on what you see, night after night. It's an ambitious undertaking, almost audacious. You obtain parchment where you can. It's still a valuable commodity. You make your own ink, perhaps from soot and gum, or trade for it in a local souk. Your notations become more detailed. You are not just marking points of light. You are trying to capture the character of the sky. One quirky or fringe tidbit from astronomical history is the long debate over nebulous objects. Ancient astronomers, including Ptolemy, had listed a few hazy patches in the sky, like the Beehive Cluster or the Andromeda Galaxy, though they didn't know it was a galaxy, terming them nebulous stars or cloudy spots. Most observers, if they noticed them at all, dismissed them as imperfections in the heavens or atmospheric effects. But under these pristine desert skies, these faint, fuzzy patches are more apparent. You begin to pay them special attention, carefully noting their position and appearance. Are they single, blurry stars, or something else entirely? Remember how you were awestruck by the Milky Way as a child. These nebulous patches evoke a similar sense of wonder and mystery, a hint of cosmic structures beyond simple points of light. Your chaplain might tell you they're where the angels mislaid some celestial stuffing, but you suspect a more physical, if unknown, explanation. This period of intense observation is solitary. You are a knight among warriors, a man of action in a world that values deeds over contemplation. Your nightly vigils are an oddity, but the desert is a place that encourages introspection. The silence, the vastness, the sheer indifference of the landscape to human concerns all conspire to turn your gaze inward, even as it is directed outward to the stars. You are, in a sense, mapping two terrains simultaneously: the geography of the heavens and the unfolding landscape of your own understanding. The war rages on around you, a thing of dust and blood and fleeting, brutal encounters. But above it all, the stars keep their silent, patient watch, and you, the unlikely night astronomer, keep watch with them. Your burgeoning catalogue is a testament not just to their light, but to your own unwavering focus in the most improbable of settings. Your dedication to charting the desert sky is no fleeting fancy. It has become a core part of your existence, as vital as maintaining your armor or practicing your swordplay. But you recognize the limitations of your current tools. The astrolabe you have, whether the one from Brother Alaric or a slightly better one acquired in the markets of Outremer, is excellent for measuring altitudes and time, crucial for navigation, and for establishing the foundational coordinates of your star map. However, for the truly precise angular measurements needed to accurately plot the relative positions of stars within constellations, or to measure the subtle shift of a planet against the background stars, you crave something more. You dream of an astrolabe of exceptional quality and size, or perhaps other, more specialized instruments, like a larger quadrant or an armillary sphere, even if a portable version of the latter would be a significant undertaking. The decision crystallizes. You must acquire or even attempt to build a superior instrument. This is no small ambition. High-quality astronomical instruments in the 12th century are rare, expensive, and the product of specialized craftsmanship. They are not typically found in a knight's saddlebags. The best instruments often came from the Islamic world, where the traditions of Greek astronomy had been preserved, refined, and advanced. Cities like Cordoba, Toledo, before its reconquest, and even after, as a center of translation, Damascus and Baghdad were centers of scientific learning and instrument making. A mainstream historical fact is that Islamic astronomers of this era, such as al-Sufi in the 10th century, had already produced extensive star catalogues and refined instruments like the astrolabe to a high degree of sophistication. Their work often included observations of star magnitudes and colors, details frequently missing from older Greek texts. Your quest for a better astrolabe, or the means to construct one, becomes a new kind of campaign. During lulls in military activity, or when your duties take you to larger cosmopolitan centers like Antioch, Acre, or Jerusalem, you begin to make discreet inquiries. This is a delicate business. You are a Frankish knight, a member of an occupying force. While trade and even some level of scholarly interaction occurred between crusaders and the local populations, including Muslims and Eastern Christians, deep trust is scarce. You can't simply walk into a workshop and commission a scientific instrument intended for purposes that might seem obscure or even suspicious. Remember those whispers of witchcraft you might face back home? In this tense, religiously charged environment, an unexplained interest in complex brass devices that point at the sky could be interpreted in even more sinister ways. You might seek out Jewish scholars or merchants, who often acted as intermediaries between cultures and were renowned for their learning. Perhaps you cultivate a relationship with a Nestorian Christian craftsman whose community has deep roots in the region and a long tradition of scholarship that sometimes included astronomy. You need someone with the skill, the knowledge, and the discretion to either procure or help you create what you need. This could involve learning more about metalworking yourself, understanding the principles of engraving precise degree markings, or the careful balancing of an astrolabe's components, the rete, the plates, the alidade. One quirky tidbit concerning medieval craftsmanship is the intense secrecy and guild-like control surrounding specialized skills. A master astrolabe maker wouldn't just share his techniques with any curious knight who wandered by. You'd need to prove your seriousness, perhaps even pay handsomely, not just in coin, but also in demonstrating genuine understanding. Imagine the scenes. You, still in your worn leather jerkin perhaps, but with the dust of the road on your boots, meeting in a quiet corner of a bustling souk or a hidden workshop down a narrow alleyway. You might use a trusted local interpreter, or perhaps you've picked up enough rudimentary Arabic or Greek to make yourself understood. You show sketches, you discuss angles, you debate the merits of different types of metal. Bronze for its durability, brass for its workability. You might spend weeks, even months in this pursuit, using your own funds, perhaps selling a piece of booty acquired in less scholarly pursuits, to finance your obsession. It's a far cry from haggling over the price of a warhorse, but the intensity of negotiation is just as real. Your fellow knights are probably using their downtime to carouse or gamble away their pay. You're trying to commission a scientific instrument. You're definitely the odd one out at the mess tent. Lost his helmet in the sun, that one has. They might chuckle. Historians still argue about the exact level and nature of technological transfer from the Islamic world to Crusader knights in fields beyond the purely military. While weapons and armor were obviously of interest, the sharing of scientific instrumentation is less well documented, but certainly plausible, especially for an individual with such a determined and specific need. Let's say you are successful, either in acquiring a finely crafted astrolabe from an Eastern workshop or in commissioning and overseeing the construction of one to your specifications. It's a masterpiece. Larger than your previous one, its plates are engraved with greater precision, the rete more delicately cut to show more star pointers, the alidade perfectly straight and true with finer sights. Holding it is a tactile pleasure, the cool metal, a conduit to the heavens. This isn't just a tool, it's an extension of your senses, a key to unlocking more of the sky's secrets. The moment you first use this new instrument under the clear desert night is one of profound satisfaction. The familiar stars resolve with greater clarity. Your measurements feel more confident, more authoritative. You can now determine positions with a new level of accuracy, distinguish more easily between closely spaced stars, and perhaps even attempt more ambitious projects, like trying to measure the angular diameter of the moon or the apparent shift of a planet over several nights with greater certainty. The forging of this astrolabe, whether through purchase or painstaking personal involvement in its creation, marks a new stage in your astronomical journey. It's a symbol of your unwavering commitment, a testament to your resourcefulness, and the means by which you will attempt to create a map of the heavens more detailed and accurate than any you have known before. The desert sky awaits its new cartographer. Armed with your new superior astrolabe and an unwavering resolve honed by years of secret study and battlefield pragmatism, your nights in the Holy Land take on an even deeper intensity. The deep heaven, as ancient observers sometimes called, the realm of the stars beyond the readily apparent, begins to yield its secrets to your patient gaze and more precise measurements. Your earlier charts, meticulously crafted as they were, now seem like preliminary sketches. With your improved instrument, you embark on a more ambitious project, to create a star catalogue that not only refines the positions of known stars, but also systematically documents the fainter stars and those nebulous patches that have so intrigued you. This is painstaking work. Each night, weather permitting, you are at your post, that quiet section of wall, that flat rooftop, or a carefully chosen spot away from the flickering lights and movements of the camp or city. You work with a focus that borders on obsession. The desert air, usually dry and still, offers exceptional seeing conditions. You learn to brace the astrolabe perfectly, to take multiple readings to average out small errors, to make your notations swiftly and accurately, by the dim light of a carefully shielded oil lamp. Enough to see your parchment, but not so much as to spoil your night vision. You develop a routine, a ritual. You might start with easily identifiable bright stars to calibrate your senses and your instrument, then move section by section through a chosen constellation, patiently logging what you see. Your charts become increasingly detailed. You are not just marking dots for stars. You are attempting to classify their magnitudes, their relative brightness. Ptolemy, in his Almagest, had introduced a system of 6 magnitudes, with first magnitude being the brightest and sixth magnitude, the faintest, visible to the naked eye. While you might not be formally using Ptolemy's exact system, or perhaps you are, if Alaric's texts included it, you develop your own consistent scale. You note subtle variations in color too, the distinct reddish tint of Antares or Betelgeuse, the brilliant blue-white of Sirius or Vega. These are details often overlooked in cruder charts. This detailed observation of stellar characteristics is a hallmark of more advanced astronomical work. A mainstream historical fact is that Al-Sufi, the 10th century Persian astronomer, in his Book of Fixed Stars, not only updated Ptolemy's catalogue, but also provided his own magnitude estimates and noted variations in brightness, including the first recorded observation of the Andromeda galaxy, which he described as a little cloud. You are, in your own way, treading a similar path of careful, descriptive astronomy. It's the faint stars, however, and those nebulous smudges that truly capture your scientific curiosity. Under the pristine desert skies, away from the light, pollution that even then would have affected observations near large towns back in Europe, you can see much deeper, stars that were previously invisible, or mere fleeting suspicions at the edge of vision, now resolve into distinct points of light. You painstakingly add them to your charts, extending the known boundaries of constellations, filling in the empty spaces. You might be one of the few people in your generation, perhaps even in centuries, to so systematically document these fainter members of the stellar family with such dedication. Remember your first awestruck view of the undiluted night sky as a child. This is that experience magnified, deepened by knowledge and purpose. And then there are the nebulous objects. That little cloud in Andromeda, the fuzzy patch in Orion's sword, the Precep beehive cluster in Cancer, which to the naked eye can look like a misty spot, but as you might begin to suspect, or even glimpse with your keen eyesight under perfect conditions is actually a collection of many faint stars. You meticulously record their positions, their apparent sizes, their shapes, their brightness relative to nearby stars. You might sketch them, trying to capture their ethereal, ghostly appearance. Are they truly clouds of celestial matter, as some ancient philosophers speculated? Are they distant clusters of stars too far away to be resolved individually? Or are they something else entirely? Something for which your current understanding has no name? Historians still debate how pre-telescopic observers interpreted these objects. While some undoubtedly dismissed them, others, like you, were clearly fascinated. Your careful documentation of these deep heaven objects, things unknown or unremarked upon by most of your contemporaries, sets your work apart. This intense focus on the faint and the fuzzy is unusual. Most practical astronomy of the day, even the more sophisticated kind, was concerned with the brighter stars useful for navigation, timekeeping, or astrology. To spend so much effort on objects that had no obvious utility would have seemed eccentric to many. But for you, it's about the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, about completing the picture, about mapping the entirety of what you can see. It's a lonely endeavor. Your squire probably thinks you've finally gone completely around the bend, staying up all night squinting at nothing much. Fighting invisible dragons in the sky, is he? He might report back to the other men-at-arms, who would nod sagely. Always said that desert sun would get him. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the occasional medieval report of new stars, novae or supernovae, appearing suddenly in the sky. While the supernova of 1054, which created the Crab Nebula, was widely recorded in East Asia and the Middle East, European records are sparse, possibly due to theological resistance to the idea of change in the perfect heavens. If such an event occurred during your watch, you, with your meticulous nightly observations, would be ideally placed to notice it, to track its appearance and fading, to wonder at its implications for the unchanging nature of the cosmos. Your star catalogue grows, scroll by scroll of parchment. It's becoming your life's work, a secret masterpiece compiled under the most improbable conditions. The desert, a place of war and hardship, has paradoxically become your university, your laboratory. The silence of the night, punctuated only by the distant call of a jackal or the soft sigh of the wind across the dunes, is the soundtrack to your discoveries. You are not just a knight who happens to look at stars. You are an astronomer, forging a new map of deep heaven, one faint star, one nebulous smudge at a time. As your nocturnal vigils become more regular and your collection of star charts and diagrams grows more extensive, you inadvertently begin to attract attention of a less welcome kind. In the close-knit, often suspicious society of a military encampment or a crusader-held town, unusual behavior rarely goes unnoticed for long. While your navigational skills might have earned you a degree of grudging respect from your commanders, your persistent, solitary preoccupation with the night sky, coupled with the strange instruments and meticulously drawn parchments, starts to breed unease and distrust among some of your peers, and, more dangerously, among certain elements of the clergy accompanying the Crusader forces. Remember Father Michael back in your family castle, the one whose jowls quivered with conviction about the comet being a bad omen. His counterparts in the Holy Land are often even more fervent, their piety sharpened by the proximity to holy sites and the ongoing conflict with those they deem infidels. To them, the natural world is God's creation, yes, but its deeper workings are his domain, not to be pried into by mortals with brass contraptions. Scripture and established authorities like Aristotle, as interpreted by the Church, provide all the necessary explanations. Anything beyond that, especially anything that involves arcane symbols, solitary nocturnal activities, and knowledge potentially sourced from unbelievers, as some of your advanced astronomical understanding might be given its roots in Arabic scholarship, treads dangerously close to forbidden territory. Whispers begin to circulate. At first, they might be dismissive jokes. Sir Night Stargazer is off communing with his celestial sheep again. Or, don't look him in the eye after midnight, he might turn you into a newt. But jokes can curdle into suspicion, especially in an environment rife with the stresses of war, unfamiliar surroundings, and a constant undercurrent of religious zealotry. Your reclusiveness, born of the need for concentration and the quiet of the night, is misinterpreted as secrecy, as having something to hide. Your charts, full of strange symbols, astronomical notations, perhaps some Arabic star names you've learned, and geometric constructions, look to the untutored eye like something far more sinister than a map of the heavens. They could be mistaken for spellcasting diagrams, astrological charts aimed at predicting forbidden futures, or even demonic pacts. You can almost hear the medieval equivalent of, he's making a list, he's checking it twice, gonna find out who's naughty or nice, for sacrificing to Beelzebub. A mainstream historical fact of the period is the Church's ambivalent and sometimes hostile attitude towards practices that seem to blur the lines between natural philosophy, astrology, and outright magic. While learned astrology for medical or agricultural timing might be tolerated, anything that smacked of divination or unsanctioned cosmic power was condemned. The concept of witchcraft as a diabolical conspiracy was beginning to gain traction, though the great witch hunts were still some centuries in the future. However, accusations of sorcery, heresy, or dealing with unclean spirits were potent weapons, capable of destroying reputations and even lives. One day, a fellow knight, perhaps one who has always been a bit jealous of your abilities or your slightly detached demeanor, might make a more pointed comment in the mess hall. "I saw Sir Knight out on the walls again last night making strange signs at the moon. My own village priest always said such things invite ill luck, or worse." Others might nod in agreement, their eyes narrowed. A chaplain, overhearing, might decide it's his duty to investigate these rumors of unorthodoxy. He might ask to see your writings, presenting him with a complex star chart full of carefully plotted stellar coordinates and perhaps calculations in a system he doesn't understand is unlikely to reassure him. In fact, it might confirm his worst fears. These are not the works of God, Sir Knight, but curious and potentially dangerous lines and figures, he might exclaim, his face flushing with righteous indignation. The situation could escalate. You might be formally questioned. Why do you spend your nights thus? What is the purpose of these strange devices? From whom did you learn these arts? Your explanations, that you are merely charting God's creation, that it aids in navigation, might fall on deaf ears or be twisted. Aids navigation, you say? Or does it aid you in foretelling events, a power that belongs to God alone? Your connection to Brother Alaric, if it became known, might be scrutinized. An eccentric monk with strange books. Sounds suspicious. Your acquisition of a sophisticated astrolabe, possibly from non-Christian artisans. Even more so, historians still argue about the precise mechanisms by which accusations of heresy or witchcraft were initiated and pursued in this era, particularly in the unique context of the Crusader states, but personal animosities, genuine religious fear, and political maneuvering could all play a part. One quirky tidbit. Even something as seemingly innocent as having a black cat could, in later centuries, be seen as evidence of witchcraft. While perhaps not so codified in the 12th century, any association with unnatural things or practices could easily tar you. Your unnatural obsession with the distant cold stars, rather than with prayer or proper nightly pursuits, fits this bill. The threat is very real. An accusation of witchcraft or serious heresy wouldn't necessarily lead to an immediate burning at the stake. The procedures were often more complex, but it could certainly lead to imprisonment, confiscation of your goods, including your precious charts and astrolabe, excommunication, or being sent back to Europe in disgrace, your reputation shattered. Your military superiors, even if they privately valued your skills, might be unwilling or unable to protect you if the ecclesiastical authorities became sufficiently agitated. The fear of divine displeasure, or simply the desire to maintain unity and religious conformity within the army, could easily outweigh the usefulness of one oddly skilled knight. You find yourself walking a tightrope. You must continue your work. It's too important to you now to simply abandon. But you must also be more circumspect than ever. You become even more secretive, choosing your observation spots with greater care, hiding your parchments more thoroughly. The joy of discovery is now tinged with a constant, low-level anxiety. The stars above are serene and orderly, but the world of men below is fraught with suspicion and misunderstanding. Your unique quest has put you at odds not just with the physical dangers of war, but with the intellectual and spiritual intolerance of your age. Just as the whispers of witchcraft and unnatural practices reach a crescendo, threatening to engulf you and your precious work, an unexpected intervention occurs. It comes not from your immediate military superiors, who are likely torn between the utility of your skills and the pressure from agitated chaplains, but from a much higher and perhaps more enlightened source, a royal figure. This could be a visiting king from Europe on crusade, a powerful prince-regent ruling one of the Crusader states, or perhaps even the King of Jerusalem himself. This individual, unlike many of his contemporaries, possesses a mind open to more than just warfare and theology. He might have a genuine, if perhaps dilettantish, interest in learning, in the sciences, or simply be astute enough to recognize true talent and dedication, however unconventional its form. News of the stargazing night might have reached this royal personage through various channels. Perhaps your commander, in a moment of private conversation, mentioned your unique navigational abilities, glossing over the more eccentric aspects. Or maybe a more liberal-minded scholar in the royal entourage, someone akin to Brother Alaric, but with more worldly influence, heard of your detailed charts and was intrigued. It's also possible that the very complaints lodged against you by the more zealous clergy inadvertently brought you to his attention. A wise ruler often keeps an ear open for unusual stirrings within his domain. Remember how the Crusader states were zones of cultural exchange? Well, some of the ruling class were more exposed to and appreciative of the sophisticated learning of the Byzantine and Islamic worlds than their counterparts back in more provincial parts of Europe. You are summoned, not to a dark cell or an inquisitorial chamber, as you might have begun to fear, but to a private audience. The setting is opulent, a stark contrast to your dusty observation posts. Rich tapestries hang on the walls, incense burns, and the king, or prince, is surrounded by a few select advisors, men whose expressions are harder to read than any star chart. You are, understandably, apprehensive. Is this the end of the line? Will your astrolabe be declared an instrument of the devil, your charts burned as heretical scribbles? The ruler observes you keenly as you are announced. He is likely a man accustomed to command, his gaze direct and appraising. He might begin by asking about your lineage, your knightly service, standard procedure. Then he comes to the point. "Sir Knight," he might say, his voice calm but authoritative, "I have heard tales of your particular knightly studies. Some find them disquieting. Tell me of this work yourself. This is your chance." With a mixture of trepidation and the quiet conviction of your passion, you explain. You speak of your early fascination, of Brother Alaric's teachings, perhaps discreetly omitting any details that might alarm, of the utility of celestial navigation for the army. But then, you go further. You speak of the beauty and order of the heavens, of the desire to understand God's creation more fully through direct observation. You might even, if you feel a flicker of genuine interest from the ruler, cautiously show him one of your charts, explaining the patterns, the way stars can be used to tell time and direction, perhaps even pointing out a detail, a faint star, cluster, or a particularly well-rendered constellation that you are proud of. You are not just defending yourself, you are sharing your passion. A mainstream historical fact is that several medieval rulers, like Emperor Frederick II, though he's a bit later, early 13th century, or Alfonso X of Castile, mid-13th century, famous for the Alphonsine tables, were known for their patronage of science and learning, including astronomy. While perhaps less common in the 12th century, the precedent for enlightened royal interest existed. The king listens, perhaps asking a few surprisingly astute questions. He might have some rudimentary knowledge of astrology himself, as it was common among the nobility, often for determining auspicious times for important undertakings. Your far more detailed and systematic approach to the stars themselves, rather than just their supposed influences, might intrigue him. He sees not a sorcerer, but a dedicated, if unusual, scholar knight. He might even see a potential asset. Accurate maps, including star charts for navigation, were of strategic importance. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for royal patronage of science was genuine intellectual curiosity or pragmatic state interest. Likely a combination of both. The outcome of this audience is far better than you dared hope. The king, far from condemning you, offers a form of discreet protection. He might not publicly endorse your celestial studies. That could cause him trouble with the more conservative clerical factions. But he can certainly ensure that the more aggressive accusations against you are quietly quashed. He might issue a statement praising your loyal service and your useful skills in pathfinding, effectively shielding you from further harassment. This night's work, he might declare to a few key people, while perhaps unusual, has proven beneficial to our cause. He is to be allowed to continue his observations, provided they do not interfere with his primary duties or stray into theological error. It's not a blank check, but it's a vital shield. Furthermore, he might offer resources, perhaps access to a safer, more stable observation post, a high tower in a secure castle, away from the prying eyes of the main camp. He might even provide you with better quality parchment, inks, or funds to acquire more texts or tools, should the opportunity arise. He might assign a young, intelligent clerk to assist you, not in the observations themselves, but in the tedious but crucial task of neatly copying your rough nightly notes into a more permanent, legible format. This would be an enormous boon. One quirky tidbit. Some medieval scriptoria had specific rulings about the quality of ink and parchment to be used for important documents, ensuring their longevity. Your star catalogue is, in its own way, becoming an important document. This royal patronage, however quiet, changes everything. The immediate threat of persecution recedes. You can work with a greater sense of security, though you remain discreet, aware that tolerance from the top doesn't always translate to universal acceptance below. The king's quiet interest validates your efforts, transforming you from a suspected eccentric into a specialist with a rare and valued expertise. Your lonely quest for knowledge has found a powerful, if unexpected, ally. The stars still glitter, with their ancient silent light, but now a small part of their earthly reflection is touched by the glint of a royal seal. With the discreet but firm backing of your royal patron, a new phase of your astronomical work begins. The immediate threat of accusations has lifted, replaced by a more stable, if still necessarily private, environment for your observations. You might now have access to that promised tower room, a dedicated space where you can securely store your charts, your astrolabe, and any other precious instruments or texts you've acquired. Perhaps the young clerk assigned to you, initially bewildered by the task of copying strange diagrams and lists of star names, has even developed a grudging interest, becoming a careful and reliable assistant in organizing your growing mountain of data. The weight of constant fear is replaced by the focused pressure of a monumental task, compiling your grand star catalogue, the culmination of all your years of secret study and relentless observation. This is not simply a matter of tidying up old notes. It's a systematic collation, a re-evaluation of every observation. You compare your nightly records, checking for consistency, resolving discrepancies. If you have observations of the same star or celestial region taken months or even years apart, perhaps some from your early days with Brother Alaric, some from your initial time in the Holy Land, and many more from your recent, more intensive period of work, you meticulously cross-reference them. You are looking for patterns, for certainty. Where readings differ, you might prioritize those taken with your superior astrolabe or under the best-seeing conditions. Remember how you noticed some stars seemed slightly out of place compared to older charts? Now, with your own body of observations spanning years, you might even begin to quantify some of these minute shifts, though the full implications of stellar, proper motion are still far beyond the cosmological framework of your time. The catalogue takes on a formal structure. For each star, you aim to record its celestial coordinates, likely its longitude and latitude along the ecliptic, the system used by Ptolemy and still standard, or perhaps an equatorial system if Alaric's texts or your own ingenuity have led you that way. You record its magnitude, using your consistent, self-developed scale. You note its colour, if distinctive. You list its constellation. For the nebulous objects, your descriptions become more refined. Their apparent size, shape, round, elongated, irregular, brightness, and any hint of resolvability into individual stars. This process of creating a systematic catalogue from raw observations is a crucial step in the scientific method, transforming scattered data points into usable knowledge. A mainstream historical fact is that the creation of comprehensive star catalogues from Hipparchus and Ptolemy in antiquity to Tycho Brahe in the 16th century represents major milestones in the history of astronomy, providing the foundational data for future theories. Your work, unknown to the wider world, is part of this long tradition. The labour is immense, an almost monastic dedication transplanted into a knight's life. Days might be spent on your regular duties, training, perhaps even skirmishes or patrols, if the military situation demands it. But your nights, and any quiet hours you can steal during the day, are devoted to the catalogue. The clerk, if you have one, might be tasked with the fair copying, carefully transcribing your often hastily scrawled observing notes onto fresh, high-quality parchment provided by your patron. This ensures legibility and permanence. You oversee this process rigorously, checking every entry, for an error in transcription could render an observation useless or misleading. It's like proofreading the universe, one star at a time. Your fellow knights probably still think you're mad, but now it's a kind of officially sanctioned madness. Sir Stargazer's at it again with his celestial account books. Hope he's not, charging the angels for overtime. You might decide on a specific epoch for your catalogue, a particular year to which all your positional measurements are referred, to account for the slow, grand sweep of precession which Brother Alaric would have explained to you. This shows a sophisticated understanding of the need for a consistent reference frame in astronomical measurements. You might draw accompanying charts, beautiful, hand-rendered maps of constellations, more detailed and accurate than any you have seen before, incorporating all the faint stars you've documented. These are not just functional data tables, they are works of art, testaments to your dedication. One quirky tidbit about old maps and charts is the often elaborate calligraphy and illustrations that accompanied them, turning scientific documents into objects of aesthetic value. Your charts might not have cherubs blowing winds in the corners, but they would have a severe, functional beauty born of their accuracy. Historians still debate the existence and influence of undocumented individual scientific endeavours during the Middle Ages. While official scholarship flowed through established universities and monastic orders, there were undoubtedly isolated individuals whose passions drove them to remarkable achievements, their work often lost to time. You are one such figure, your catalogue a silent testament. As you work, you are acutely aware of the legacy you are creating. This isn't just for your own satisfaction. You hope, perhaps, that this knowledge will be preserved, that it might be useful to other scholars, other navigators, other curious minds in generations to come. The thought of your catalogue gathering dust, unread and unappreciated, or worse, being lost or destroyed in the endless conflicts of the region, is a heavy one. You take pains with its physical construction, sturdy bindings, good quality ink and parchment, hoping to give it the best chance of survival. Slowly, painstakingly, over months, perhaps even a year or two of concentrated effort. The midnight catalogue, as you might secretly call it in your own mind, takes shape. It's a hefty volume, or perhaps a series of bound scrolls filled with your life's work. The sheer number of entries, the consistency of the observations, the inclusion of objects rarely or never before systematically documented. It represents an achievement far beyond what anyone might have expected from a 12th century knight in a war-torn land. It is your quiet rebellion against the chaos and ignorance of the age, a meticulously ordered cosmos captured on parchment, a deep and personal conversation with the stars made tangible. The final entry is made, the last chart, lovingly drawn. Your great work for now is complete. The completion of your midnight catalogue brings a profound sense of accomplishment, a quiet joy that resonates deeper than any battlefield victory or royal commendation. You have looked into the vastness of the cosmos and brought back a map, a testament to years of unwavering dedication. For a time, you ensure its safety, perhaps keeping the master copy in the secure tower room provided by your patron, maybe even entrusting a carefully made duplicate to Brother Alaric, if communication and travel allow, or to another trusted, learned individual, if such a person exists in your circle. You might even dream that, through your royal patron's connections, some of its findings could be discreetly shared with wider circles of scholars, perhaps finding their way to the nascent universities in Europe, or the established centers of learning in the East. But life in the 12th century, especially in the volatile Crusader states, is inherently unstable. Alliances shift, rulers die, wars flare up with renewed intensity. Your patron, however enlightened, is not immortal, nor is his influence absolute or eternal. He might be recalled to Europe, fall in battle, or be succeeded by someone with entirely different priorities. Someone who sees a Scholar Knight's star catalogue not as a treasure of knowledge, but as an irrelevant eccentricity, or worse, a waste of good parchment that could be used for military dispatches. Remember that grumpy demon in the well your nursemaid warned you about. Political instability is its much larger, scarier cousin, capable of swallowing whole libraries, let alone one knight's precious work. The time eventually comes for you to leave the Holy Land. Perhaps your term of service is over, your health is failing, or the political situation becomes untenable. You undertake the perilous journey back to your homeland, your catalogue your most precious possession, more valuable to you now than your sword or shield. Or perhaps, in a darker turn of fate, you do not leave. You might fall in one of the endless skirmishes, a victim of disease, a far more common killer than combat, or simply of old age, your final years spent in that distant, sun-scorched land that became the canvas for your greatest work. What happens to the catalogue is now subject to the whims of fate and the chaos of history. If you make it back to Europe, what reception does it find? Your family castle, if it still stands and is in friendly hands, is hardly a centre of astronomical learning. Who there would understand or appreciate its significance? Father Michael, if he's still around, would likely see it as definitive proof of your dangerously unhinged mind. All those years of stargazing finally culminating in this monstrous, incomprehensible tome. Too much desert sun, I always said. Cooked his brains, it did. You can almost hear him. This is where your story, the story of your direct influence, begins to fade. Your groundbreaking maps, your detailed observations of faint stars and nebulous objects, your meticulous measurements. They are likely lost, or at least, they vanish from the main currents of recorded history. There are many potential paths to oblivion. The catalogue could be stored in a monastic library, like the one where Brother Alaric toiled, only for that monastery to be sacked and burned in some local conflict a generation later. A depressingly common fate for centres of learning throughout history. A mainstream historical fact is that countless ancient and medieval manuscripts have been lost due to warfare, neglect, fire, and the simple decay of materials over time. The survival of any text from that era is often a matter of sheer luck. Perhaps the catalogue is inherited by a less than scholarly descendant who sees no value in a dusty old book of sky scribbles and allows it to rot in a damp cellar, or even recycles the expensive parchment for some more practical purpose, like legal documents or account books. The vellum pages, scraped clean of your celestial observations, could end up recording land transactions or laundry lists. Historians still argue about the extent of such palimpsesting, the reusing of old parchment, and what treasures of lost knowledge might still lie hidden beneath later texts. Your name, too, fades. You were a knight, one among many, Your battlefield exploits, if any were particularly notable, might be briefly mentioned in some chronicle, but your true passion, your secret life as an astronomer, would likely go unrecorded by contemporary historians, who were more concerned with the deeds of kings and the outcomes of battles than with the quiet work of a solitary skywatcher. There would be no grand observatories named after you, no university chairs dedicated to studying your findings. You are a footnote that was never written. The tragedy is that your work, had it been widely disseminated and understood, could have potentially accelerated astronomical understanding. Your detailed observations of faint stars and nebulae, your precise positional measurements, your potential hints at stellar proper motion. These were insights that often took centuries more to be independently rediscovered and accepted by the broader scientific community. Your meticulous approach was ahead of its time in many ways, especially for someone working largely in isolation. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the enduring romantic notion of lost ancient wisdom, the idea that past civilizations possessed knowledge that was subsequently forgotten, only to be painstakingly rediscovered much later. While often exaggerated, there's a kernel of truth in it when considering individual works like yours, which, though not ancient in the classical sense, represented a significant personal advancement that failed to enter the wider stream of knowledge. So your maps vanish. Your name fades from memory. The stars you charted continue their silent, ageless dance, oblivious to the fate of the human hand that tried to capture their likeness. The desert nights that witnessed your labor return to their profound, unobserved stillness. For centuries, it is as if the stargazing night and his midnight catalogue never existed. The chain of knowledge you might have forged is broken, or at least deeply buried. Your unique story, a strange and wonderful anomaly in the tapestry of the 12th century, becomes one of history's quiet secrets, waiting perhaps for a different kind of explorer, centuries later, to stumble upon its faint, almost invisible traces. Centuries drift by like clouds across the moon. The world of the 12th century, with its crusader knights, its hand-copied manuscripts, and its geocentric cosmos, recedes into the deep past. New ideas ignite across Europe. The Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution. Copernicus places the sun at the center of the solar system. Kepler describes the elliptical orbits of planets. Galileo points a telescope towards the heavens and reveals wonders previously unimagined: the moons of Jupiter, the mountains of the moon, the myriad stars of the Milky Way. Newton unveils the laws of universal gravitation. The universe is becoming a vastly different and infinitely larger place than the one you knew. Your astrolabe, once a cutting-edge instrument, is now a quaint museum piece. Your meticulously hand-drawn charts, if they had survived, would seem primitive compared to the photographic plates and digital sensors of later astronomy. Yet, even in this new age of scientific discovery, the past is never entirely erased. Historians, archivists, and antiquarians, driven by their own insatiable curiosity, delve into forgotten archives, decipher faded manuscripts, and piece together the fragmented narratives of earlier times. It is in these dusty corners, among neglected documents and half-forgotten chronicles, that the faint echoes of your story might begin to resurface. This is not a sudden, dramatic rediscovery, but a slow, painstaking process, like an archaeologist carefully brushing away layers of earth to reveal a buried mosaic. The quest to find you might begin with an anomaly. Perhaps a later astronomer, studying old star catalogues, notices a peculiar reference in a marginal note of a 14th or 15th century manuscript, a brief mention of an unusually detailed set of observations attributed to an unknown knight in the Holy Land, or a certain Frankish soldier with a gift for the stars. Such mentions are often dismissed as legend or misattribution. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval and early modern scholars built upon previous works, sometimes copying older data without full citation or incorporating fragments of lost texts into their own compilations. Tracing the provenance of specific astronomical data can be a complex and often frustrating task. Or perhaps a local historian, researching the records of a particular noble family, your family, stumbles upon an old household account book or a letter that makes a cryptic reference to a kinsman who spent his nights in strange converse with the heavens while on crusade. It might mention the great cost of parchment for his celestial maps, or a curious brass instrument he brought back from the east. Such a clue is tantalizingly vague, a breadcrumb almost lost in the forest of time. Remember your clerk carefully copying your notes. Maybe one of his practice sheets, or a discarded draft, ends up bound into the back of an unrelated legal document, only to be found centuries later by someone with the knowledge to recognize the astronomical symbols. The real breakthrough might come from the patient work of a scholar specializing in the history of science, particularly the transmission of knowledge during the Middle Ages. This historian might be studying the very monastery where Brother Alaric toiled, or examining the archives of a Crusader-era institution. They might find a fragment of a letter from Alaric to another scholar, mentioning his promising but impetuous knightly pupil, or perhaps even a partial copy of one of your early charts, kept by Alaric as a memento or a teaching example. Historians still argue about the reliability of such anecdotal evidence, but sometimes it's the only thread available. Imagine this scholar, let's call her Dr. Eleanor Vance, working late in a dimly lit archive surrounded by stacks of ancient vellum. She's an expert in medieval Latin and the history of astronomy. She comes across a bundle of uncatalogued monastic papers. Most of it is standard administrative records, tithe collections, land disputes, disciplinary notes about monks' court, sleeping during matins, a timeless problem, no doubt. But then, tucked within, is a series of folios that are clearly different. They are covered in precise geometric diagrams, columns of numbers, and star names, some Latin, some clearly transliterated. Arabic. The style is not quite like other known astronomical texts of the period. There's a certain directness, a focus on observed detail that feels personal. Dr. Vance might notice specific observations that are unusual for the 12th century, a particularly careful description of a nebulous object, or a list of faint stars in a constellation that are not typically included in standard catalogues of the era. She might cross-reference these with known texts, with Ptolemy, with Al-Sufi. She realizes that some of these observations are unique, possibly original. One quirky tidbit about historical research is the eureka moment that can come from recognizing a tiny, anomalous detail that everyone else has overlooked. That one, strangely precise measurement of a star's declination, inconsistent with established sources, but internally consistent within these mystery pages, could be the key. The scholar's quest becomes a detective story. Who made these observations? When? Where? The watermark on the parchment, the style of the script, the dialect of any vernacular notes all become clues. Perhaps there's a colophon, a brief note at the end of a section that mentions "in the lands of Outremer, under the clear desert," sky, or a date, or even a cryptic monogram that could be a signature. If the papers are connected to Brother Alaric's monastery, she might look for any records of knights or nobles who were patrons or had extended stays there. It's a slow burn. Years of research, collaboration with other specialists, linguistic, analysis, paleography. The evidence is pieced together, fragment by fragment. A reference here, a corroborating detail there. The stargazing knight begins to emerge from the mists of anonymity, no longer just a legend, but a person of flesh and blood, a man who lived a dual life, his days given to chivalry, his nights to the cosmos. Dr. Vance and her colleagues might publish papers in obscure academic journals, present findings at specialized conferences. Your story starts to be told anew, not around a campfire in the desert, but in the hallowed halls of academia. The almost forgotten twinkle of your astronomical achievements is at last being noticed again. The painstaking work of scholars like our fictional Dr. Vance begins to breathe life back into your almost vanished story, while your midnight catalogue itself, in its complete form, may remain lost. perhaps forever lurking in some uncatalogued monastic archive, or turned into palimpsests centuries ago. The fragments and indirect evidence paint a compelling picture of your unique achievements. The focus now shifts from simply rediscovering you to understanding the potential, albeit subtle, impact your lost knowledge might have had. Did your observations, even in fragmented form, ripple outwards? Did any part of your meticulous work subtly influence later astronomical thought, even if your name was not attached to it? This is where historical detective work becomes particularly speculative, tracing faint lines of possible transmission. If Brother Alaric, for instance, incorporated some of your detailed observations of faint stars or nebulous objects into his own teachings or correspondence, these might have been passed on to his students or to other scholars he communicated with. Monasteries, while sometimes isolated, were also part of wider networks of learning. A visiting scholar, impressed by a particularly accurate star position or a novel observation shown to him by Alaric, who might have presented it as his own or simply as recent findings from our house, could have copied it down and carried it elsewhere. Remember that astrolabe you forged or acquired? If its design incorporated unique features or calibrations based on your advanced understanding, and if that instrument survived and was studied by later instrument makers, it could have subtly influenced their craft. Consider the journey of manuscripts. A partial copy of your charts, perhaps one made by that clerk under royal patronage, might have found its way to one of the great translation centers, like Toledo. There, even if unattributed, its unusual accuracy or its inclusion of previously unrecorded objects might have caught the eye of a translator or a compiler working on a new Latin edition of an Arabic astronomical text. Your data could have been silently absorbed into a larger corpus of knowledge, a single, high-quality thread woven into a much larger tapestry. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval astronomical tables and catalogues were composite works, drawing on multiple sources, often without clearly delineating which data came from where. Your observations could have become part of this anonymous stream. Historians still argue vehemently about the continuity thesis versus the idea of revolutionary breaks in scientific development. Was there a more continuous, albeit often underground, stream of observational knowledge flowing from antiquity through the Middle Ages to the Renaissance? Or was the scientific revolution a more radical departure from a largely stagnant preceding era? Figures like you, if your work had even a minor uncredited influence, would lend some credence to a more nuanced view of continuity, suggesting that pockets of advanced empirical work existed even in periods often characterized as less scientifically dynamic. The impact might be almost untraceable, like a single drop of dye in a vast ocean. Perhaps a later astronomer, struggling to reconcile older texts with his own observations, comes across a manuscript containing a table of star positions. He notices that a few specific entries, for stars in a particular region of the sky you, meticulously mapped, are unusually accurate for their supposed date. He might use these corrected positions in his own work, without ever knowing their true origin. Your careful measurement, made under a desert sky centuries before, thus subtly improves the accuracy of a later calculation or theory, its provenance entirely lost. It's a ghostly form of influence. One quirky tidbit about the history of science is the phenomenon of multiple discovery, where several individuals independently arrive at the same idea or observation around the same time. However, it's also true that sometimes a lost discovery, like yours, means that later scientists have to essentially reinvent the wheel, painstakingly re-observing and recalculating what had already been known to a select few. If your catalogue had survived and been accessible, could it have saved later astronomers some effort? Could your observations of, say, the Andromeda Nebula have spurred earlier investigation into such objects, had they been more widely known? These are the what-ifs that fascinate historians of science. Imagine Dr. Vance presenting her research. She might show a slide comparing a section of a known 14th century star chart with a reconstructed portion of yours, based on the fragments she's found. Notice here, she might say, pointing to a cluster of faint stars. These are depicted with an accuracy not generally seen until much later. While we cannot definitively prove a direct link, the similarity suggests that the anonymous compiler of this later chart may have had access to a source deriving from the stargazing knight's lost catalogue. It's not definitive proof of direct lineage, but it's a compelling circumstantial case. Your legacy, then, might not be a grand, well-lit monument, but a series of faint, almost invisible footprints in the sands of scientific history. It's in the slightly improved accuracy of an old table, the unexplained inclusion of a faint object in a forgotten manuscript, the subtle refinement in an antique instrument's design. These are the faint twinkles left by your life's work. It's a quieter form of immortality than being a famous king or a celebrated poet. But for a man who found his solace and his purpose in the silent, enduring stars, perhaps it's a fitting one. Your passion, once a secret, then a local curiosity, then a forgotten footnote, now contributes a subtle, almost ghostly light to our understanding of how knowledge of the cosmos was painstakingly built, lost, and rediscovered. And so, your story, once buried deep beneath the dust of centuries, finds its way into the flickering light of modern understanding. You, the 12th century knight who dared to look beyond the battlefield and into the heart of the cosmos, emerge, not as a king or a conqueror, but as a quiet pioneer, a solitary seeker of celestial truth. Your midnight catalogue, even if it remains a ghost in the archives, a collection of meticulously documented fragments and compelling inferences, speaks to a profound dedication that transcended the limitations and expectations of your era. As we reflect on your journey, from that first awestruck gaze at the unpolluted night sky of your childhood, to the disciplined observations under the stark beauty of the desert heavens, a unique picture forms. It's a life lived in two worlds, the brutal, immediate reality of feudal warfare and the serene, eternal order of the stars. You managed to navigate both with a singular focus, in a time when intellectual curiosity, especially when directed towards the heavens in such a detailed, empirical way, could be viewed with suspicion, even hostility. Remember those whispers of witchcraft, the very real threat of condemnation. You persevered. You sought out forbidden tomes. You painstakingly crafted crude tools. You found a mentor in the reclusive brother Alaric, sharing a passion that few around you could comprehend. Your astrolabe, whether the one you struggled to make or the finer instrument acquired in the East, became an extension of your own keen sight, a key to unlocking the precise geometry of the night. The Crusades, that vast, tumultuous clash of cultures and armies, became, paradoxically, your greatest laboratory. The clear desert skies offered you a canvas of unparalleled clarity, while others fought for earthly kingdoms or heavenly reward in more conventional ways. You fought to understand, to map, to catalogue. Your navigational skills, born of this celestial passion, proved unexpectedly vital, guiding comrades through perilous nights, bridging the gap between your secret world and the pressing demands of your nightly duties. That quiet interest from a king, a moment of enlightened patronage, provided the crucial shield that allowed your most intensive work to flourish. A reminder that even in ages often characterized by dogmatism, sparks of intellectual curiosity and tolerance could exist. Your meticulous attention to detail, the charting of faint stars previously ignored, the careful description of nebulous patches that puzzled and intrigued you, the striving for accuracy in a world often content with approximation, set your work apart. You weren't merely repeating the knowledge of the ancients. You were testing it, refining it, adding to it from your own direct experience. This empirical spirit, this dedication to seeing for yourself, is the hallmark of a true scientific mind, regardless of the era. A mainstream historical fact is that the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries was built upon just such a renewed emphasis on observation and empirical evidence. You were, in your own quiet way, a precursor. The fading of your name and the loss of your complete catalogue is a poignant reminder of how fragile knowledge can be, how easily the contributions of individuals can be erased by time, conflict, or simple neglect. Yet, the work of later historians, piecing together the fragments, allows your legacy to shimmer, however faintly. It's a testament to the enduring human desire to understand our place in the universe, a desire that can bloom in the most unlikely of individuals and in the most challenging of circumstances. You stand as a symbol of that quiet, persistent quest. As we look up at the night sky today, even through the haze of modern city lights, we are looking at the same stars you charted. Polaris still holds its place near the celestial pole. Orion still strides across the winter sky. The Pleiades still glitter like a handful of scattered diamonds. Your understanding of them was different, framed by the cosmology of your time. Yet your wonder, your curiosity, your drive to map their silent dance connects us across the centuries. You remind us that the pursuit of knowledge is a timeless endeavor, and that sometimes the greatest adventures are not those found on earthly battlefields, but in the quiet contemplation of the vast, starlit unknown. You were a knight under the stars, your true allegiance sworn not just to a feudal lord, but to the majestic, unfolding mystery of the cosmos itself. The echoes of your astrolabe, gently clicking as you made your nightly measurements, have long since faded into the silence of the past. The parchments you so carefully marked, filled with the precise locations of distant suns and mysterious celestial clouds, have largely crumbled or been lost, their ink dissolving back into the elements from which they were made. Yet, the spirit of your quest, that unlikely fusion of chivalric duty and profound astronomical curiosity, lingers like the faint, persistent light of a star that has long since burned out, but whose image still travels across the immensity of space to reach our eyes. Imagine, for a final moment, that quiet tower room, or that sheltered spot on a desert dune. The air is cool and still. Above, the universe wheels in its silent, majestic procession. You are there, a solitary figure, wrapped against the night chill, your gaze fixed upwards, your mind alive with the patterns and the mathematics of the heavens. There is a deep peace in this communion, a sense of order and beauty that transcends the often chaotic and brutal world of your daylight hours. The soft scratching of your stylus on parchment is the only sound, a tiny human endeavor to capture an infinitesimal fraction of an infinite reality. The concerns of war, of politics, of earthly ambition all seem to recede, dwarfed by the sheer scale of what lies above. This sense of perspective, this momentary glimpse of our own smallness against the backdrop of cosmic grandeur, is perhaps one of the greatest gifts that the night sky can offer. And you, the knight who mapped the stars, embrace that gift with a quiet passion that defied the expectations of your time. As you drift now towards sleep, perhaps you can carry with you a sense of that immense, starlit peace, a reminder of a human spirit reaching for understanding across the vastness of time and space. The universe keeps its secrets well, but every now and then it allows a dedicated soul a peek behind the curtain. Sweet dreams.